Hello and welcome to the Really Rubbish Racing V8 Australicars. We're here at the final event of the championship at Surfers Paradise, the street circuit of course. We had Sam Hirani, who was crowned the Really Rubbish Racing V8 Australicars champion last time out, and Nick, we're set in for a cracker of a final event.
We certainly are. Everything's come down to this now. Obviously the championship's been decided, but there's still a few more places to be determined, and seeing as it's the last time out, a lot of people will just go hell for leather and throw caution to the wind, and usually that does produce some very good racing.
Certainly does. Of course, a 40-minute race duration today, 24 laps of this street circuit, one of the two street circuits we have indeed visited on the calendar. So looking forward to the action, of course, getting underway. And it's been a bit interesting qualifying. A lot of drivers struggling with grip, and of course the championship at the stop though is decided. Let's have a look further down though, Nick.
Yeah, so Ollie Knight's there in second. He can be caught by James Harper, but it will take quite a bit to do that. And of course Lee Harrison as well can overtake James Harper himself. The closest battle really is there between Alex O'Donnell and Joe Nathan, only separated by 4 points.
Indeed,
and of course James Lambert and Golder on the same amount.
Exactly, so it's very interesting. Of course, drop scores coming into effect as well. It's pretty much to play for second place in the championship at the moment.
Yeah, so Ollie can add anything he likes to his because he's already missed a couple of rounds, and James himself has to drop a few depending on his results. Lee Harrison can add all he likes as well because his only non-scoring finish was at the double points race at Bathurst.
It certainly was. So as I mentioned, of course, drivers struggling with grip at this circuit, the street circuit proving to be a very, very difficult challenge for the drivers. And of course, it's not got as many corners as you might expect for some street circuits, only about 11 or 12 or so. But there's quite a few sort of fast chicanes, and the real turn one is a very, very quick left-hander despite those chicanes. So it's only actually registered as 11 turns on the circuit, but 11 turns of challenges nonetheless for the drivers. But it's been a cracking season of racing so far, and of course we are expecting that to continue. So a 40-20 split here, of course a 40-minute race for the first one, and then the second race will be a 20-minute sprint for the final event here in the V8 Australicars series. It's the Gold Coast finale at Surfers Paradise then, and we are waiting, of course, for the pole lap. We'll show you that in just a few moments' time, tell you who, of course, scored pole position. Let's have a look then. It was James Price Harper, of course, of the offenders. He took a 1:38.2 pole lap. Let's have a look at him on board then. Coming in towards his first series of chicanes. Very, very difficult. Third gear, then up the box in towards the second right-hander, and then the left. Look how close he is to the wall. Really, really riding that car very, very nicely on those curbs. And it's performing very, very well indeed. Coming down the blast then through the right-hander in towards turn 3. Very difficult left-hander, 90 degrees, of course, and then turn 4. This is a 75-degree left-hander. It comes back on you very, very nicely, and Price Harper negotiating it very, very well, and going out of there, of course, shifting up the box before the 5 and 6 chicane left, and then a right-hander up into 5th, just about to touch 6th gear, but not quite, and then down the box, of course, into 2nd gear for 5, and then to 6, up the box once again, 2nd gear, getting a bit squirrely on the exit does Price Harper, but coming out of there very, very nicely indeed, and heading down once again towards a set of a couple of chicanes. So here we go then through these very nicely, just momentary lifts off the throttle for Price Harper, and negotiating the track very, very nicely indeed before he heads down in towards the final part of the lap, heading in towards turn 9 and then turn 10 and then in towards 11. This is of course Serist Avenue as well, a very, very nice part of the lap, and then towards final turn 12 he comes now, getting very, very nicely through there. Clipped the wall, of course, a little bit earlier on, but got out of there very, very nicely did Price Harper, and coming down the run now to cross the line, and it was a great pole position for the number 78, James Price Harper, in the best possible position, Nick, to take his first win of the season so far.
Yes, it's only his third pole position of the season, remarkably enough, although there have only been 10 qualifying sessions. And yeah, so very committed, skillful and determined lap, and skill and determination are the two things you definitely need to be able to conquer this circuit. And they're coming around on the formation lap now, and you can see that one of the, there's Kim's obviously behind him, and one of the Valor Racing teams back on row 2, Joe Nathan and Bjorn Golder alongside him.
Yeah, very, very close between those guys at the top. Just 2 seconds separating the top 4. And around this circuit, of course, being a street circuit, that's not too bad, actually. Further down the order, Neil Crawford in 5th for the Kaibutsu Racing team. Rob Covey up there in 6th place. Great qualifying from the Howler Racing, number 43. Pete Walker down in 7th. Liam Blair making his return to the V8 Australicars Championship in 8th. Alex Adele be a bit disappointed, 4 seconds off the pace in 9th, with Dan Thorne for company on row 5. Row 6 is April Dillon, who, of course, often races better than she qualifies, number 315, joined by Craig Woolard of Eiffel Power Motorsports. Then comes Campbell Wallace, Ben Haddleton there in 14th, and Matt Davies some 12 seconds off the pace, indicating that he didn't manage to get a clear lap in qualifying. He starts finally in 15th position.
Yeah, a bit of a small grid, smaller than we're used to, so it's a good opportunity for some last race points for some of the drivers who don't usually score. And of course James Bryce Harper looking for that elusive first victory. He's had so much bad luck, including last time out when he was spun at the first corner.
Well, certainly so. So can Bryce Harper finally break his bad luck run here at the final event of the V8 Australicars Championship? We're on board with them with the pole sitter as he leads the field round to come across the line. Of course, a rolling start here at Surfers Paradise, and needless to say, we are expecting it to be action aplenty as well. So he's doing a very, very nice job of warming up his tyres. We'll wait then for the 5 red lights to come on now, and Bryce Harper on the left-hand side of the screen, Harani on the right. The final event of the V8 Australicars Championship is go. Bryce Harper leading away very, very nicely. Golder threatening, of course, Joe Nathan there in 3rd position, coming in towards turn 1. Oh, they're all going to make it cleanly through. It's a very, very tight chicane. Bryce Harper gets away very well. Golder hitting Joe Nathan there, and also Campbell Wallace, Neil Crawford and Alex O'Dell caught up in an instant there through turn 1, and Dan Thorne now also going around now as well. So he's into the barrier. A shame there for the Independables driver. Speaking of bad luck, he really hasn't had any in the championship so far, and it goes from bad to worse for the number 802. But what a chaotic start there, Nick.
Yeah, repeated last time round. Just seemed like there was one little accident, of course, street circuit, any kind of accident, it's going to block the track and cause a chain reaction. And you see Pete Walker there trying to overtake his power teammate of Alex Odell, and he gets by him up in 7th place. Ben Hamilton there running by with no front bumper.
Yeah, so Haddleton obviously clipped the barrier, of course, and I thought Craig Woolard didn't have one there, but that's just his front bumper paint scheme, rather, I should say, that's very, very off-putting. Who's that into the barrier? That's Campbell Wallace then. Crawford who spun at turn 1, and you can see there Haddleton without a front bumper and locking up. And there's Odell spinning round in towards turn 5, and lucky not to get collected there by any drivers, clipping the barrier. Hopefully he didn't suffer any damage, but he's down towards the back of the field now. A shame there for the number 23. Meanwhile, his teammate Pete Walker challenging Ben Haddleton. Haddleton straight under the chicane and getting out of the way, of course, of the drivers just behind him. And there we are, Pete Walker getting up into 8th position now, getting ahead of Matt Davies on the lap 1. So number 71, Pete Walker, making inroads in towards the rest of the field, and he's got quite a way to go until he gets his way up into the sort of lower point scoring position, 7th place. Another yellow flag on screen. That's the Howler Racing car of April Dillon. Sorry, Rob Covey, I apologise. Oh dear, a chain of incident there, causing Dan Thorne to get caught up as well. What a shame there for those guys. Bit of a drama on lap 1, but needless to say, of course, James Bryce Harper leading the field round. At the end, of course, he's just started lap 2 with his teammate, Sam Harani, and that's Pete Walker spinning around at the final corner. All sorts of drama going off, so Pete Walker's hard work on lap 1 coming undone, I'm afraid to say. Neil Crawford, meanwhile, is looking to threaten Rob Covey coming down the main straight. It's a very, very long one. He's around the outside. He's not got the optimum line in towards turn 1, but if he can get the run, I think he might be able to do him up the outside, and indeed he does. So there we go, Neil Crawford up into 12th place and into the points. Meanwhile, Rob Covey into the barrier out of the first corner. Oh, goodness, what's going on?
Yeah, they'll need a bit to calm down. We're in. There's Pete Walker getting a new front bumper. He'll be in last position now. Second to last, because Ben Hampton is also in the pits for that. So 2 drivers there whose race is already pretty much run. I think Ben Hampton will be having the same expression as Captain Picard on the back of his car there, because just nothing he could really do about that.
That's the first time I've noticed that, actually. We haven't really seen many close-ups of Ben Haddleton's car so far in the V8 Australicars Championship, but there we are. That's quite amusing. That's made my day, that has. Meanwhile, April Dillon looking to threaten Matt Davies, of course. Davies, who qualified last, didn't really show his true pace in qualifying after not being able to get a clean lap in, and is now coming under threat from number 315, April Dillon, the only female driver in the field so far in this series, and doing a very, very nice job up into 9th place for Dillon then Howler Racing trying to claw some points back, of course, after Covey's demise on lap 1. So some consolidation there for the Howler Racing team, Nick.
Yeah, for Covey obviously having. So here's a replay of the start. Someone hit the barrier there. Pete Walker, I think we're going to see that's what happened to Neil Crawford, and Pete Walker trying to take a ride in action, and then see it from his teammates' point of view. It looks like he got a bit surprised by one ahead of him and just spun the tyres a bit up. And yeah, there's another view. That's what happens to Bjorn Gold. A clip from behind, not really his fault there.
No, certainly not. So a chain of incident, of course, like we saw at the Circuit of the Americas, though not to the same extent. And there is Rob Covey and Dan Thorne having a bit of a Kamui Kobayashi moment, of course, at Monaco. Who remembers that a few years ago? And Dan Thorne going into the barrier. I thought he might have lost it on his own, but it was indeed an incident, of course. Further down the order, there it is in fast motion in the foreshot of the ground. And there's Pete Walker. That's why he was so far down the order after lap 1. He qualified relatively well, but of course an incident further back in the order. Meanwhile, Rob Covey, otherwise known as Wolfie, into the pit lane. And I don't think he's known as Wolfie, or The Wolf, I think is probably his proper nickname. Meanwhile, James Price-Harper setting the fastest lap, 2 seconds off of his qualifying pace, but a great lap nonetheless, of course. The tyres still coming in towards their optimum temperature zone and full tanks of fuel on board, as well as opposed to qualifying fuel that they'll have run. Meanwhile, Matt Davies and Dan Thorne around the outside of Davies there, up into 9th position.
Yeah, Dan Thorne will be pretty pleased with that overtaking manoeuvre. He always tries and go for the more visually spectacular move than the easy pass down the inside. So another position made up there by Dan Thorne, who obviously got caught up twice in that thing. And that is Dan Thorne. He's spun it just as he's made the overtake.
Oh, a shame there for number 802, Dan Thorne, of course, the only Independables driver at the race this weekend. Of course, Tom Bellingham away on wedding duties. More on that later on, I'm sure. But, of course, Dan Thorne flying the flag for the Independables, and at least he's getting a lot of TV time.
Oh, Odell's gone again.
Oh, dear, his bad luck run continues. He's had a bit of a torrid weekend, has Odell, at the Surfers Paradise Street Circuit, really not being able to find his rhythm. And further example of that. Meanwhile, Haddington again without a front bumper on lap 4.
Yeah, I wonder how many they've got those left in the garage, because he's gone through 2 of them, well, 3 of them already. And so there they are. They fix it and see what happened through the really fast section. And yeah, he just spun the rear tyres up a bit and sent it straight into the wall. Lucky to miss Pete Walker there. Would have been in his 4th incident if he'd been able to collect him.
Yeah, very, very impressed at Haddington, still continuing onwards. Meanwhile, James Price-Harper, as we mentioned, of course, is comfortably out in front ahead of his teammate. He's got a good gap on him. He's not even in the same shot almost is Sam Hirani. There he is, just going through now. So I'd say Price-Harper's got a good couple of seconds over his teammates. Certainly not something that we've seen from the offenders drivers, of course. Hirani's been there and thereabouts, at least when Price-Harper has had the ultimate pace. But of course, Price-Harper has had a lot of bad luck in this series so far, as we do keep referring to. He really hasn't had his opportunity to have his true colours shown in the series, and he's looking to get his maiden victory, of course. A shame to come on the final weekend, but he'll take a victory nonetheless. Meanwhile, Liam Blair, on his return to the championship, not doing too badly at all. As I say that, spinning up the tyres a bit there, but recovering it masterfully. We haven't seen much of him, of course, as I mentioned in the series. Someone else who's doing very well, Craig Woolard, up in 5th place.
Yeah, 5th place. I mean, it's still a long way to go, but if he did finish there, that would be far and away his best result of the season. And there's Campbell Wallace there as well, there behind him, who is in 6th, and I think that would be his personal best there. So, and of course Joe Nathan, who came off the back of his 4th place in Circuit of the Americas, on the podium currently as it stands, as we saw before. So quite a few drivers here looking like they might walk away from the final round with a best result.
Yeah, certainly taking advantage, of course, of those around him, those around his misfortune, I should say. Craig Woolard looking a bit understeery going through that fast chicane, perhaps carrying a bit too much speed, or maybe he's just a bit unhappy with the balance of the car, or maybe he doesn't indeed prefer an understeery car. It's interesting, of course, the difference in setup. Some drivers prefer, some guys prefer the car to be a bit loose into the corners. I personally, when I've driven these cars, of course, only in testing, when I like the car to be a very, very sort of rotating in towards the corner. I like the rear to be a bit skittish, and I find it helps the car turn personally, but different strings for different bows, as the saying goes.
Yeah, when I was doing the Green Turismo series, when we were on Gran Turismo 6, I had a very similar setup, a car that really liked to turn in strongly, and then that way you can position it for a better exit. But some like to do the opposite with understeer. They want to, looks like Craig Woolard's hit the barrier there.
Yeah, certainly has. So 6th position down there for Woolard, number 86, of course, going down the order, and now 7th place. And Alex Odell into the barrier once again. God, dear, what on earth is going wrong? Just being missed there by Matt Davies and Dan Thorne, who is still slugging it out, of course, for the lower points positions. We cross back to that battle then, coming down the Esplanade in towards turns 5 and 6. Let's have a look and see who's going to get the whole shot. Dan Thorne around the outside of Davies in towards turn 5. Davies got track position, but nowhere to use it, or has he? They're very, very close, not coming for blows. Look at that cracking racing. And Dan Thorne up into 9th place. Matt Davies shuffled down to 10th, but I don't think he's going to take it lying down, but will he have the opportunity to respond to Thorne's pace?
Well, we've seen a few overtakes like that, but I think that's the first time we've seen this season someone defend by trying to go around the outside. And it was done masterfully by Dan Thorne. It looks like Neil Crawford is going to get by Matt Davies. They had a really scruffy time of it in the S's.
Yeah, certainly did. Meanwhile, of course, Howler Racing's Rob Covey not too far behind as well. So Davies really could be going a bit further down the order. Lap 6 out of 24. We're on the 40-minute race here. The V8 Australicars at the Surfers Paradise Circuit, of course. One of the only events that we visit on the calendar that's near the ocean as well. But fortunately, wind won't be coming into play. Meanwhile, there's Crawford having a bit of a spin for the Kaibitsu team and going around the order and going down the order as well, I'm afraid to say, down to 12th position. And that'll be like a cup of cold steak for him, unfortunately. He'll be a bit disappointed with that, but a bit of a recovery drive. Meanwhile, Haddleton, a shame for him, does eventually succumb to the barriers, again without a front bumper there, Nick.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's terminal damage or if they just simply didn't have any more parts to put back on him. But Sam Harney, the gap, if you might notice on the time in there, is stabilised now to around 2.5 seconds. Of course, they're coming for some traffic, so depending on if either driver gets lucky or unlucky with it, that could change to quite a bit ahead though of Joe Nathan, who's only slowly being caught by Liam Blair at the moment. So here we have Sam Harani, not really making too many inroads into Pete Walker at the moment.
No, certainly not. So, of course, we can see that traffic has indeed come into play, as you mentioned there, Nick. So, I wonder whether Harani just getting stuck in that turbulent air, of course. I know that Pete Walker will indeed eventually have to move out of the way, and he does so coming in towards turn 1. This is the effective turn 1, I should say. Ooh. Walker going into the barrier there as well. Oh, the Southern Yorkshireman, he's having a torrid run, and Power having a terrible run of luck here at Surfers Paradise, and they will be hoping for a better race too. Of course, the sprint race, we'll wait and see whether they can take advantage of that. Meanwhile, Rob Covey and Matt Davies coming to blows into the chicane. They're both into the barrier, and I think Rob Covey was just caught out by how much Matt Davies slowed down there, and both of them going straight into the wall and hopefully not suffering any damage. Davies spinning coming back onto the circuit. Rob Covey stopping in a rather promiscuous place as well on the circuit. Davies without his front bumper as well, so I should imagine both will be having to return to the pit lane. Let's have a look at the incident there, Nick, on board.
And I think he's just going to go, yeah, wow, really fast into him, just completely misjudged how Matt Davies was going to do that. Of course, you can take that sequence corners two different ways. You can try and be slow in and get a quick exit, or you can try and be fast in, and you see the result, what happens when two cars too close on the track take two different approaches to it.
Yeah, you certainly can. So a bit of a torrid mid-race scrap for those guys at the moment, but Bryce Harper, needless to say, leading out in front. Number 78, of course, he's taken a fair few podiums in the series so far, and we, of course, are very, very impressed with Bryce Harper. He's shown anything but a lack of determination. Of course, he's been very, very determined in this series so far, even when the luck hasn't gone his way. Meanwhile, Matt Davies, of course, in the pit lane. You can see there a new front bumper going onto his PSP Motorsports Holden, but you cannot take anything away, of course, from Bryce Harper's determination and commitment in this series so far. He really has been on top of his game. He's taken a couple of pole positions, but not really had the opportunity to utilise them. And will we finally see things to come good for the number 78? I'll certainly be rooting for him. I know we're not supposed to be biased, of course, in the comms box, but there are certain drivers who you do want to see perform well, especially when they've had such a run of bad luck. And Bryce Harper, I think I can vouch for the both of us there, Nick, when we say we do want him to get that maiden victory.
Yeah, it's always a shame when someone has the pace, but things never seem to go the way. Of course, he's only had a couple of podiums as well, so it's not just wins that have eluded him. Sometimes he's really had to come from behind, as we saw during Circuit of Americas, where he made his way all the way back up to third position in race 2. So here's Neil Crawford battling with Alex O'Dell. Both of them have been in quite a few incidents lately, but and as I say that, Alex O'Dell just completely locks his brakes up and looks like he might have been stuck, or is he going to try and swing around again? Yeah, he's reversing. So still not giving up, Alex O'Dell, despite what must be his 5th or 6th spin in this race.
Yeah, I think he just locked the rears coming into that corner, so a shame there for Odell, of course. Number 23 has got all of that hard work to do again. Fortunately, he avoided clipping the barrier, which really would have put pace in his race, and I should imagine he'll be very frustrated inside of that purple helmet. Meanwhile, the battle for 5th position continuing onwards between Campbell Wallace and Bjorn Golder. Scuderia Acello versus Kai Butsu, of course, just out in front. The number 64 Campbell Wallace had a relatively interesting run, shall we say, a couple of rounds ago at Barbara Gallo. He was often on camera, but not often for the right reasons. Had a few spins in the race, but it was a long race, of course, and a race of high attrition as well. And of course, he's now got Bjorn Golder for company as well. Golder, who I'm very impressed with, actually. He's performed very well into the second half of this season. Of course, he did quite well at the Circuit of the Americas last time out, claiming at some good points-paying positions for the Scuderia Acello driver, and we'll wait and see whether he can indeed capitalise on that for race 1 here at Surfers Paradise, Nick.
Yeah, and of course he did qualify in 4th position, but was involved in that starting lineup. He qualified really well at Circuit of Americas as well, and also suffered from the first lap drama. So hopefully he can show a bit more, get a bit more good luck, and we can see some better results for him. He's definitely deserving of a podium, and like you say, he's really upped his game in this final part of the season. But Campbell Wallace is not going to be an easy person to get by. He's putting his car in all the right places, and Bjorn Gold, you can see him snaking behind him, just trying to see if there's any way he can put his car to try and get by him. But Campbell Wallace really does seem to look like he's got it covered at the moment.
He's a wise young head, should I say. Wallace is, of course, and Golder as well is certainly a driver who knows how to overtake and knows how to attack, but in the same sort of limelight, Wallace knows how to defend. I should mention that, of course, Bjorn Golder's best result to date, I think, was a 5th position, 2 5th positions rather, at the Circuit of the Americas last time out. That, of course, were the results, or those, of course, were the results I was referring to earlier on. And Golder, I think, just clipping the barrier there as we cross on board with the number 10. So Scuderia Acello coming down the straight, heading in towards that tricky chicane, and very different lines you can see the two drivers taking, and Wallace really not able to take the corner speed through there, so maybe suffering a bit more tyre wear than he would like. He doesn't look to be that comfortable with his Holden at the moment, Nick, and as you can see, Golder really does look to be in that sort of groove that you can get yourself into in these cars.
Yeah, Wallace did look a bit laboured for those corners. It is probably one of the biggest tests of the car's weaknesses that we've seen on the calendar, because these cars aren't very good at, they don't have a lot of good front end really, and you can see Golder's really right under his rear wing almost, desperately trying to get by him, but still nowhere by. So yeah, it's really hard to turn in with a base setup, and of course you've got to be turning multiple times, which is not something which is really easy to do. So it's been a few drivers obviously set up their cars, been able to do that better than others, and some just don't seem to crack it yet. But as you say, it could be that Campbell Wallace himself is suffering from tyre wear.
Oh, and I think he's just clipped the barrier coming out of the first chicane there, and that's really going to allow Golder to close coming in towards turns 3 and 4. Golder goes towards the outside, Wallace going defensive. Will Golder be able to get the undercut? I don't think he's going to be close enough through turn 3, but he's got a great exit out of there. In towards turn 4 they go now, and he's really right over the back bumpers of the two Holdens, going absolutely head to head. Coming down the Esplanade then in towards turn 5. This is a really long straight, and it's really going to allow Golder to close up. Wallace knows that though, and goes defensive. You can see him going over towards the left-hand side of the circuit. In towards the braking zone they go. Golder looking around the outside, not quite close enough to get side by side. We've seen an overtake around the outside there between, I think it was Dan Thorne, of course, and I think it might have been one of the Kaibitsu drivers earlier on in the race, Neil Crawford in fact, but Golder not able to get past him there, and this is where you can see how much faster Golder is behind the wheel of that Holden. Just looks to be so much more comfortable, really on the ragged edge there, getting the backside of his car hanging out through that corner, and in towards the final parts of the lap they go towards turn 9 and 10, and Wallace clipping the barrier on the outside there, getting very untidy on this lap, and he really is now under pressure from the Scuderia Acello driver. It really does look to be a bit of a waiting game then for Golder.
Yeah, although he scuffed the barrier a bit there, he does seem to have good traction though, remaining in his car, Wallace, so this is really what's saving his bacon at the moment. But Golder really hasn't been any closer than this before as he is now, so could have a prime opportunity into turn 1. Not really the best taking position, but if you're a bit brave you might be able to scare someone into letting you have it. But you see Wallace pulling away from him on the straight, so it looks like he's got maybe slightly lower downforce setting, or just like I said, slightly better to be able to utilise all the way down the straight.
Yeah, certainly so. We saw, of course, at the Circuit of the Americas last time out that slipstreams weren't necessarily that effective, even with a kilometre-long back straight, of course, at Kota. Guys weren't being able to get past that very well in the slipstream. Meanwhile, here's, of course, Bjorn Golder trying around the outside again into turn 3, and he's just not close enough going into there. He's just not able to get that close in the slipstream. Again into turn 4, he gets very close, and this is where... Oh no, coming out of there, he just goes straight into the barrier, lighting up the rear tyres. Does number 10, Bjorn Golder, and in 6th position, of course, he is now, and that looks to be where he will remain, of course. Dylan there, you can see the background of the shot. He's got a fair advantage over her at the moment, but that is a bit of a... Oh no, as I say that, of course, Golder without a front bumper just coming into the shot there as well, so damage worse than first feared. Oh dear, so that really has gone from bad to worse for Golder.
Yeah, just slightly too eager there on the throttle, and that's what it took to lose his front bumper. So what could have been quite a promising recovery position, it looks like it's going to ruin his race. Well, there's still half the race left to go, so maybe if he can get some new tyres on whilst he's fixing that front bumper, we could see him charging back through the field, but looks certain to promote April Dillon up to 6th place, who's quietly made really small inroads into these two lap after lap, which is what we come to expect from her driving styles. And if she can just keep it on, although not making a mistake, she hasn't had many good results of late. Certainly not as impressive as the opening season, but she might be able to finish this last lane on a high.
Well, certainly so. She qualified in 11th position at the moment and is going very, very well, of course, looking to take, or she will take 6th position as Golder does indeed dart into the pit lane then. So Scuderia Cello guys coming out of the pit box, and Golder will go in there, of course, and pop a new front bumper and perhaps a new set of tyres. That will be a bit of an advantage for Golder at least. He'll probably put some new tyres on whilst the other repairs are ongoing, and that means he'll have fresher rubber than the drivers around him for the end of the race. So you never know, a late race surge, especially with the lower fuel, could come into the advantage of Bjorn Golder, but I think he'll have a lot of time, or he will have a lot of time to make up at the moment.
Yeah, obviously it wouldn't not have been in his plan to do that, but you never know, he might be able to even make his way back up to his original position if somebody makes a mistake. Meanwhile, Dan Thorne has been hold of Craig Wooler for what looks like quite a few laps now, and a little train begins to form as Neil Crawford is catching up to the pair of them. Dan Thorne, of course, is a very good defender, so it's no surprise to see Craig Wooler hasn't got by him, and he as well clips the barrier, so that could be the dirty air in effect, or maybe just taking an eye off the ball as well. And it looks like Neil Crawford is now close to Craig Woolard, and it looks like he's going to have a little cheeky look down the inside, or had to get out of it, missed it, and there's James Price-Harper. I think he's coming up to lap them, so he doesn't really want to be entangled in a three-way battle, because really could allow Sam Harani to catch right up to him.
Yeah, Crawford very, very masterfully recovered the locking of the rears there. Of course, it's easy to lock these rears even with a forward brake bias, and especially, of course, with Crawford, who likes... Oh, there's Price-Harper off! Sorry to interrupt there. He comes straight off in towards turn 5 and 6. Thank goodness for the recovery road there. Otherwise, that could have been his race run, unfortunately. But he does indeed maintain the lead and just goes far too deep in towards turn 5. And Neil Crawford getting out of the way, of course. And Price-Harper is able to carry on his way, but that will have shaken him a little bit. And he has got a comfortable gap, I should say, though, to Sam Harani, of course. Still in the same shot. I think the gap's increased a little bit over the past few laps, of course. Over half the race gone, and just under half the race to go at Surfers Paradise Street Circuit, of course. And Harani at the moment doesn't look to have an answer. Let's have a look on board of that incident with Price-Harper coming in towards there, and just too late on the brakes, it looked there. Locking the rear tyres and through 5 and 6. And like I mentioned, of course, he's very lucky there wasn't a tyre wall or something along the lines of that through the chicane. Otherwise, that really could have put pay to his race. Of course, he could have collided with the tyre wall, and you never know, could be pitting for a front bumper right about now. But fortunately not.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the first this race, but sometimes even the bollards can cause a bit of damage if you hit him the wrong way. But lucky for James Price-Harper, so he just needs to calm down a bit. Sam Harney behind him looks like he's given everything he has, so if he makes a mistake, then that would make James Price-Harper's life a bit easier, so he doesn't really need to do anything stupid himself if he doesn't, and Dan Thorne's getting out of the way there. So yeah, doesn't want to put him to the barrier trying to stay ahead of Sam Harney, who, as you said, despite his erratic driving, as we saw, it doesn't look like he's actually making any inroads into the lead.
No, so Price-Harper, even with his sort of quick pace at the moment, you can see him just in the background of the shot there has Sam Harani, so he has caught up a little bit to Price-Harper, but of course that long straight is a bit, deceiving, should I say, to the gap. We'll have to wait and see when they cross the line next time as to what the gap truly is. but Bryce Harper looks to be fairly comfortable in control of this race, and I think he's just going to be going for consistent lap times, but he's still pushing fairly hard, so maybe he's not backing off just yet. Knows that Hirani does have an answer to his pace, and you can see Bryce Harper just missing the apex of that corner there through turns 9 and in towards turn 10 they go now, once again for the 14th time. But Bryce Harper just needs to settle down, of course, continue his rhythm, but just be a little bit slower and just a little bit more controlled, a little bit more calm. He's got this race in the bag, providing things continue as they are. And I think he could probably afford to let Hirani close up to probably within, I should say, a second, maybe even half a second, and Bryce Harper would still be able to respond. It's just about saving tyres, of course, with the 40-minute race, tyre wear with the vast number of corners in this circuit, of course. Not necessarily high-speed corners, there are a few quick chicanes as we know, but tyre wear does come into play, especially with such a long race. The 40-minute feature race, of course, here that you're watching at the moment. Meanwhile, Dan Thorne, of course, and Craig Wollard still going absolutely hammer and tong for the lower points-paying positions. Dan Thorne has had a very good run at the moment so far, sitting in about 7th position, and Craig Wollard has really responded to that, in fact, as well. I'm very impressed with Wollard's pace at the moment. He's got an answer to Dan Thorne, of course, at the moment. Let's have a look at the gap between Bryce Harper and Hirani. So it is a 5.9 seconds, so a 6-second gap between the top two. Joe Nathan far behind in 3rd position, so Bryce Harper could really afford to back off, I should say, by about a second a lap, and Hirani, for the next few laps at least, and Hirani would indeed be able to catch up, but I think that Bryce Harper would probably still have the pace to be able to answer him. Meanwhile, of course, as we mentioned, still lower down the order on board with Wollard at the moment, chasing down Dan Thorne for 7th position. Easily their best race between these two of the season so far.
Yeah, Dan Thorne, this would equal his best performance so far. He's had a lot of non-finishes as well. So Craig Wollard is one we've seen him improve as pretty much with every race he's done. He's still a relative newcomer, especially compared to someone like Dan Thorne, who's been in many seasons and is certainly a seasoned veteran of really rubbish racing. So Craig Wollard learning the ropes, learning more about the car each time he drives it, and we've seen some very good pace from him.
Oh, Thor going a bit wide there.
Just makes a bit of a mistake.
Yeah,
there.
sorry to cut in front of you there, Nick. Going a bit wide there into the final corner, and Wollard isn't able to take advantage of it as much as you would indeed imagine, so Wollard must have had a bit of a poor exit out of the final corner, and he's still a good couple of car lengths behind, 3 or 4 car lengths in fact, on the straight, so indicative of course that Dan Thorne does have a lower downforce setting. As we've discussed before, Nick, Thorne does indeed like a bit of a slippery car underneath him.
Yeah, it's how he likes to turn the car into the corners, to pivot the rear around to be able to get it pointing more straight out of the corners, if you will. And it is a setup which is good for these V8 Australia cars, because you've got a very heavy front end and not much front aero, or not much aero at all. So any way you can try and get the car to turn is good. We haven't really seen the results you'd expect though. I mean, Dan Thorne is sitting pretty nice at the moment. He's got his headlights on at them for some reason, maybe just left them on by mistake or whatever, but Craig Wollard is not really giving up. Any mistake he makes, he's able to latch straight back onto the back of Dan Thorne, so he's going to have to fight a very heavy rearguard action if he's going to keep this position.
Yeah, I think he might just be biding his time with Wollard, but again, he's really not closing off on the straight, so of course Wollard must have a higher downforce setting on the car. Yellow flag you can see with the graphic at the top of the screen. We'll wait and see whether that's just a driver who's gone straight on maybe the chicane, or whether someone's had a bit of a collision with the barrier. As soon as we know more, of course, we'll let you know. The flag goes to green, so obviously it wasn't a large incident, but of course Dan Thorne, he's struggling of course in the twisty stuff. That's why Wollard's able to close right up, but of course onto the straight is where Dan Thorne is able to pull away, so it's a bit of a waiting game, but he hasn't got that much longer left to do it, of course, coming now on to just under 7 laps remaining of the race at the moment here at the Circuit of the Americas, and that is April Dillon getting very sideways, chasing down Campbell Wallace for 5th position at the moment.
Yeah, these are the two ahead of the previous two we saw, and Campbell Wallace has performed very well. He's soaked up all that pressure before from Craig Wollard, which forced him into making a few mistakes, and now he's got April Dillon to contend with it. Sorry, it was and she's sitting comfortably behind, really, not really following too closely. Of course, that could be a tactical thing, just trying to save the tyres a bit and then have a go at the end, but actually looks like she's had a much better exit through that sequence of corners. But not really close enough to make anything of it just yet, but I think she'll be thinking about maybe making the overtake here now, because she really has actually caught up to him quite rapidly in that last few corners.
Yeah, as we know, Dylan does often perform better in the race and is very, very kind on her tyres. And as of course we've seen, Wallace has had a few spins, and when you spin, you're putting so much energy through those 4 sets of tyres, of course, and it really does wear the rubber down quite significantly, even if you're not in fact intentionally trying to cause it. So Wallace, even with a lockup, you can put a flat spot on the tyres, so Wallace really struggling, of course, in the latter stages of the race. I expected Dylan to close up there, so again, indicating that Wallace has got a lower downforce setting on his car, with Dylan, of course, aiming to be able to get past the Holden in front of her on the, or in the corners rather I should say, and that is where she's so good, in towards that final sector. It's a very Mickey Mouse sort of sector, a lot of 90-degree corners and a couple of hairpins chucked in there as well, just for good measure, and it's a case of Dylan having to close up in towards the braking zone to perhaps muscle her way past in towards the final sector of the lap, because that's where she's very, very strong, of course, as we saw in the last lap. Meanwhile, of course, out in front is James Price Harper, still comfortably ahead of his offender's teammate. Meanwhile, of course, this battle still ensues onwards for 5th position at the moment. Wallace and Dylan coming in towards this very, very quick chicane. This is where we saw Wallace really struggling earlier on in the race. Dylan taking a similar line through there though, so not able to close up as much as we've seen other drivers do on Wallace. And in towards the final part of the lap, the first of the 90-degree left-handers, turn 9 and in towards turns 10 and 11. And this is where, of course, we see Dylan getting ever so close, just gets right on the back bumper of the Holden, but unfortunately has nowhere to use it. So I think she's going to have to try and pressure Wallace into a mistake into that final corner there, perhaps in a couple of laps' time, and that is where we will see the overtake potentially take place. But lap 18 out of 24 we're on here at the Gold Coast finale of the second of the Surfers Paradise street circuit, rather I should say. Price Harper still out in front, increased the gap to Samperani, rather, his teammate, 6.6 seconds, so it's gone up by about half a second or so. So Price Harper certainly not backing off at the moment, as Wallace gets a bit squirrely coming through that chicane there, and that allows Dylan to get a bit closer where you wouldn't expect her to do so.
Yeah, but I don't think she's still quite close enough to get any kind of overtake here. It is the problem with this circuit, you can have cars make a mistake, but of course they're in a part of the track where you can't capitalise them. The undercut or switchback, as some people call it, really isn't as effective strategy either. It really is about waiting for the guy ahead of you, or girl if you're able to make a serious enough mistake for you to have a really good run at them and maybe outbrake them down the inside. And as you can see there, even though for that long straight, April Dillon was nowhere near Campbell Wallace to be able to maybe stick her nose down the inside and scare him out of the way. Although he has had quite a bad
coming
exit
on turn
there.
6, and that allows Dylan to get very close ahead, but again, Wallace defending his line, and there's not really enough sort of time for Dylan to be able to utilise it through there. It came at the worst possible moment for Wallace to get a very poor exit out of there. But needless to say, coming in towards turn 9, she tries around the outside, or looks towards the outside. Wallace going very defensive in towards there, knowing that Dylan is very, very close behind. And in towards turns 10 and 11 they go once more on lap 19, so 5 laps remaining of the race here, and in towards turn 10, and Dylan getting closer than she has ever been before, so just trying to pressure Wallace into a mistake. In towards the final corner they go. Wallace locking the outside front and going a bit wide there, but that causes Dylan to do exactly the same, as she brakes just as late as Wallace does. It's very, very deceiving, of course. You see the brake lights come on and you immediately stamp on the brakes, and if your driver has overcooked it, it's very easy for the driver behind to overdo it as well. And a yellow flag on screen, someone coming out of the pit lane there as well. Not entirely sure who that is. Should give a quick mention that Alex O'Dell and Rob Covey have retired from the race, so a shame there for those two. Of course, O'Dell having a very poor run in this race. Not testament, of course, to his true pace. And Covey, of course, we saw having a couple of spins, and potentially that was why we saw the yellow flag earlier on in this race. But 4 laps now remain. Price Harper comfortably out in front of his teammate Joe Nathan in 3rd position, looking to take a podium in the race. Meanwhile, Liam Blair, unbelievably impressive, in 4th position at the moment, and 5th position, still rages on between Wallace and Dylan, of course.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Liam Blair's quality time and time again. He was a championship contender last season. But, James Price-Harper looks like he's suffered some
What
kind
on
of
earth is going on there for Price-Harper? Unbelievable set of luck. Oh, his teammate goes flying past. Sam Hirani takes the lead on 4 laps remaining. What has happened to Price-Harper? Is it some kind of engine failure, maybe? Some kind of electrical fault? Let's have a listen. He's just stopped at the moment. The engine's not running. Is he able to get it rebooted? These cars have got onboard starters. Will he be able to get the car going once again and perhaps salvage a podium? And indeed, yes, there we are. So he does get the engine running once again. What on earth went wrong there? We'll have to wait and see whether we can get a replay. But Price-Harper, what has he got to do to be able to take a victory in this series so far? An unbelievable run of bad luck continues, and second place is the best he can hope for. Then let's have a look at the incident with Price-Harper. I don't think he's going to clip the barrier. Nope. And there it is. So his engine just cuts out. Let's have a listen. So he's going down now.
Yeah, it sounds like it just completely dies for a second, and maybe some kind of electrical glitch that cuts out the engine, and had to sort of fiddle around to see how he could get it going again.
Such a shame for Price-Harper, though. Of course, we mentioned about him being able to try and take a victory in the season so far, and he was able to get it back up and running once again, thankfully, so he will be able to salvage something out of this race. And second place is not something to be snubbed at, but I think Price-Harper will be saying some rather British swear words inside that crash helmet. Thank goodness we haven't got team radio at the moment, because I dread to think what he'd be saying about that. But he does manage, of course, to get the engine running, but the spoils look to be taken by his teammate. Meanwhile, here's Dylan and Wallace in towards the final corner, and they had a bit of contact that we didn't see on screen, and it got a bit messy. Wallace spun up the rear tyres through there. That allowed RlyR to get through, and is Dan Thorne going to get through as well? No, he doesn't. So there we go, and still ensuing onwards for 5th position at the moment. So Dylan and Wallace carrying on, but testament, of course, to the offenders at the moment. They've lapped all the way up to 5th position.
Yeah, I think RlyR there was actually a lap down on the pair of them, and I think that's who we saw coming out of the pits just a few laps before. So they're still in 5th and 6th position, and Edward clearly getting quite impatient now, trying to get by Cam Wallace. Surely it must only be a matter of time, but as I said before, so difficult to pass in this circuit, and really difficult to get past Cam Wallace on any circuit. So is she going to be able to get it done? It might take some kind of last lap heroic lunge from her part, unless Campbell Wallace snaps under this tremendous pressure that she's putting under him.
Well, that's the thing, of course. She's going to be running out of laps. She's really got to make a move while she can. Coming around the outside, maybe in towards turns 9. And no way through there at the moment, but she's really close. Look at this great racing between these two. And as you mentioned, of course, Wallace going so defensive, they're just trying to block the line. It's reminiscent, of course, of Senna and Mansell at Monaco in '92. Of course, Senna was on such worn tyres, and Mansell just wasn't able to get past
looks like he's made the mistake there.
He has got a bit wide, of course. I said that Dylan would be able to try and pressure Wallace into a mistake, but will Wallace be able to pull away on the slipstream? On the straight, rather. Dylan goes into the slipstream now, and indeed he does. So Wallace able to still get ahead despite that mistake, and of course that lower downforce setting on that Holden really is paying dividends for the Kybitsi driver. Saved his bacon there, but he got very, very loose in towards the first chicane, and in towards the second one they go now. But Dylan not able to close up. 2 laps remaining, of course, with Sam Hirani leading the way. Price-Harper in 2nd. Joe Nathan still in 3rd position as far as we know at the moment, but it's all to play for. The best battle on track at the moment is the one you're watching between Campbell Wallace, number 64 in the Kybitsi Racing Holden, and then of course the Ford of the Howler Racing April Dillon, number 315, is harassing Campbell Wallace, rather, I should say. Another name beginning with a C. Coming in towards turn 5 they go, down the Esplanade once more for the 3rd but last time. Yellow flag on screen, going around the outside for Dylan, no way through there for the chicane. Wallace, of course, getting a bit wide. RlyR spinning up the tyres, of course, going past there. Of course, as you mentioned, he's a lap driver, so he's a lap down, and RlyR will be a bit disappointed down in 11th position after running as high as 7th earlier on in the race. And look at that, Dylan closing up so much in towards the chicane, once again heading towards turn 10, and so close. This is where that this is where we see Dylan getting so close in towards the braking zone, trying around the outside, trying to get the switchback, but Wallace covers the line gracefully and heading in towards the final turn 12, has no way through to move it there. A stunning bit of artistic defending from Wallace in towards the final corner, locking those fronts once again, but Wallace defending his line very nicely. On towards the back straight they go, and crossing the line again to start lap 22 for these guys, and just no way through for the Howler Racing driver on the Kaibitsu team at the moment. But such great driving between these two, nothing taken away from them.
Yeah, it's like the greatest defensive boxing match in history between these two. They've been following each other and been followed by each other for quite a few laps. They know each other's every punch and counter punch, and you can see there April Dillon realised the best way for her to get by Campbell Wallace would be to sort of slow down before going into that triple corner chicane and speed out and try and get him on there. And Wallace realised that she had twigged to this and then put his car in exactly the right place to stop her from trying to get around the outside. And it looks like she's got a bit of breathing space now on this, so that might be able to save him from any further attacks unless Abel Dillon can really get back on his tail shortly.
Well, certainly so. So the Kaibitsu driver, of course, Campbell Wallace, looks to have a bit of a breather, as you mentioned. So all he has to do really is sort of keep up his pace at the moment, and surely the position will be his for the taking. But he is so much slower in this final corner, and this is where Dylan is able to close up. And as we can see, of course, she is closing up so much, even through that chicane, in towards the final corner, final sector rather, where she is so strong, and in towards turns 10 and 11 of Cereza Avenue, and hit down Parade Hill. And look at this.
Yeah, every little mistake Wallace is making is fortuitously placing his car in a position where Abel Dillon can't get by. And here's Craig Willard. I mean, he's a lap down, not only on leaders but on these two, so he kind of...
Wallace spinning out the final corner. Willard doing exactly the same thing. Dillon then goes up into 5th position, so Wallace finally succumbing to the pressure and going into the barrier, trying to spin the car around. Will he be able to recover to 6th position? I think he might just be able to hang on to it. Yes, indeed he does, of course, because Bjorn Golder is very far back of him. So Wallace... oh, what a shame for him. It was only a matter of time before Dylan got ahead, but I don't think that's how he'll have wanted to do it. Let's have a look then at the instant coming out of the final corner, and those worn tyres just coming into play too early on the power. Woolard doing exactly the same thing, and nowhere for Wallace to go to spin the car around as Woolard came straight through the shot. But nothing taken away from Sam Harani, of course, on the final lap. The offenders driver has driven a faultless race, and it was, of course, when Bryce Harper suffered a rotten bit of luck with just a few laps to go until the finish. Robbed him of his first victory, but nothing taken away from the really rubbish racing V8 Australian champion. He has driven superbly nonetheless.
Yep, the victory might have been handed to him, but all those laps beforehand he was put in, he was certainly best of the rest, and sometimes that's all you need. Just put yourself in a position and things can go your way and you reap the rewards.
Well, that certainly is the case for Sam Harani coming in towards these final series of corners. The number one, of course, he'll retain that for another season in really rubbish racing, and I'm sure he'll look forward to defending his title as well as we move on to the different challenges we face next season. So round the final corner comes the offenders, Sam Harani Holden, and he's flashing his lights, of course. He knows the race victory belongs to him then, so Sam Harani under the bridge for the final time and crossing the line. Harani takes the victory at the circuit. Of course, the Surfers Paradise Gold Coast finale, the feature race, belongs to Sam Harani. James Bryce Harper takes 82nd position. I think there will be some kind of consolidation for the technical gremlins that were not its fault at all. Really did rob him of his race victory. He's got one more opportunity to do so. Can he do it in the sprint race? But nonetheless comes around the final corner to take a masterful podium here at the Really Rubbish Racing V8 Australicars Championship. So crosses the line, and Bryce Harper takes a well-deserved second position. He'll be very dejected, but I'm sure there'll be a sense of pleasure about it as well. And Joe Nathan, what can we say about him? The number 26, of course, of the Valor Racing team. He's had a bit of a contact with the wall. You can see there the dented in door, and almost losing it under the final corner, but keeping it together just about. And he crosses the line then, does Joe Nathan, and he will take a well-deserved podium position. I think he will be absolutely thrilled with that and doing a Tom Bellingham-esque end to the race.
Yeah, almost celebrated a bit too early with donuts at the final corner, but he's crossed the line, he's got his first podium there, and he can justifiably celebrate, as can Sam Harani, who won this race by a much bigger margin than actually the really should have if the race had been won without James Bryce Harper's technical problem, who was quite far away ahead of him at the time. I think the gap was inching towards the 10-second mark. So yeah, Joe Nathan there, first podium of the season, very well deserved. Liam Blair, stunning fourth position on his debut, as I was going to say before. We've seen the quality of the driver before, but he's only done a few races in his car, and to come back and finish in fourth position is quite the achievement.
Well, certainly so. Odell, of course, Covey and Hamilton failed to make the finish, unfortunately. What does this mean for the championship? Well, it's pretty much as you were. Harani, of course, extending his lead. Ollie Knight, though, and James Bryce Harper tied on points. Drop scores will come into play, of course, as we know for Bryce Harper. So he'll have to surely take a victory and able to, in order rather, I should say, to be able to get ahead of Ollie Knight, of course, who is not racing here this weekend. Further down the order, it all changes. Liam Blair with that magnificent fourth place jumps right up to 17th position in the championship. Also Dan Thorne and Craig Wallock going up as Tom White goes further down the order, and other drivers, of course, yet to score, of course, on the board. For the teams championship, everything pretty much as you were. Power and Junior Motorsports the closest battle in the championship. Scuderia and Cello, though, going up to 9th place ahead of Tropico Motorsports, Eiffel Power Motorsports further down the order, as well as Monolith Motorsports and PSP Motorsports. Then we'll have highlights, of course, of the race. Let's have a look and see what happened. Of course, off the side, it was Bryce Harper who took pole position, of course, in qualifying, and he led the field away as the flag went green. There was a lot of incident in towards the first chicane. A lot of drivers getting caught up, of course, with a chain reaction being caused with drivers going around. Pete Walker, of course, suffered a bit of an incident in towards turn 3. It got caught up later on in the race as well with the Howler racing car, and of course we saw Dan Thor getting caught up as well. Meanwhile, Rob Covey and the Kaibitsu number 222 Neil Crawford went side by side, as well as April Dillon and Matt Davies, of course, later on in the race. And there was a lot of wheel-to-wheel action. We saw Dan Thor making a masterful overtake. Meanwhile, Ben Haddleton made quite a few taps with the barrier, whilst Dan Thorne, there's that move around the outside, of course, with Matt Davies. Davies, of course, ended in the barrier, unfortunately for him, as did Bjorn Golder. We saw James Bryce Harper, of course, midway through the race, suffering some kind of technical gremlin later on. He's straight on the chicane, and then it all went to pot for the number 78. A mystery electrical gremlin on his car, really putting pay to his race. Meanwhile, it all got a bit messy between Campbell Wallace and April Dillon, of course, for 5th position in the race. And it all came to blows a bit later on, as we saw with Wallace spinning out of the final corner with Woolard going around in sympathy, and that led for Dillon to take the position. But the race belonged to Sam Harani, 27 seconds ahead of James Bryce Harper.